بنت العربان يا بوي لهلي بونار يا بوي.
This episode was produced in Arabic and translated and dubbed into English.
مرحبا، معكم لارا. أنا بودكاستر من لبنان.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Aswatona podcast. I am Lara, a Lebanese podcaster. I've been working at writers' rights since 2020.
وأنا فرح بودكاستر من لبنان وعضو بهيئة.
And I'm Farah, also a Lebanese podcaster and a faculty member of the Faculty of Information at the Lebanese University in Beirut. Today in Lebanon, Lara and I are discussing the relationship between gender and shared transportation in a new episode of the Aswatona podcast. Our colleague Toufic from Palestine has worked on the pre-production with us.
لما نسمع الأغاني اللبنانية القديمة منلاقي كتير منها بتحكي عن الطبيعة والجمال.
When we listen to old Lebanese songs, we find that many of them speak of nature and beauty. Homes with brown tiles, food and evening, and other things inspired by our Lebanese heritage. As in Fairuz's song, Al-Busta, meaning the local village bus, we'll find that the history of transportation in Lebanon is quite rich. There are old pictures of the tram line that went through Bliss Street in Al-Hamra, Beirut in the 50s. You can actually find the remains of the train tracks from the time of the French Mandate. The train was fueled with coal and reached from the south to the north. The trains that used these tracks afterward were sadly destroyed during the war in the 70s. Now, let's talk statistics. In 2013, the Ministry of Environmental Affairs stated that the number of registered cars had risen by 3.9 since 1994 in Lebanon. In 2014, the Lebanese Ministry of Public Works and Transport presented a plan to the cabinet to restore public land transport for citizens. The plan included several measures and the development of a public transport system that would have covered areas all over Lebanon, such as a railway system and restructuring the public bus system, as well as improving the pedestrian infrastructure. To find out more about these plans, we got in touch with Mr. Shadi Faraj, a founding member of Riders' Rights Organization. Mr. Faraj informed us that there are no government buses currently operating. In 2019, there were still around 35 state-owned buses in local transportation. But after the explosion at the Beirut port in 2020, operations were suspended. There were also 2 private sector initiatives, Yalla Bus, but that has already been stopped, and the Bus Map project, which still exists today. Mr. Faraj says that in the complete absence of a proper public transportation system, we have 23 different syndicates for transportation drivers in addition to 6 unions. The transportation known as service in Lebanon is a taxi pooling system that is very popular. While the government fails to provide state transportation, we cannot deny that the unofficial taxi pooling system performs an almost impossible task. It takes people, especially those with a low to middle income, to their destination. Since gas prices rocketed and the Lebanese lira floated in 2019, the price of a trip by a minibus or a van, as they call it in Lebanon, in Beirut currently costs 50,000 Lebanese lira, almost 50 US cents. And the service ride costs between 100,000 and 300,000 depending on the distance.
تخطيط المدني بيلعب دور مهم بالفجوة بين الجنسين.
Urban planning plays an important role in the gender gap because women's positions improve when cities are built to accommodate their needs, and they are given more space for cultural and civil participation. To achieve this goal, women should be allowed to play leading roles in the joint planning and design of cities. Men and women have different needs and means of transportation, and transportation policies need to acknowledge these differences. The inadequate means of transportation hold women back from education, financial opportunities, and healthcare.
حلو جسمك، شو اسمك؟ حبيتك، وين بيتك؟ شو هالحلو؟ في منك على جلو؟ هالحكي
You're
الصريح
hot. What's your
بالألفاظ
name?
بيفرق
I
فيه
like
كتير
you.
جزء
Where do you
كبير من
live?
تجربة
Hey,
الحياة
pretty. Do they
والرحلة
make you in jelly
والمعاشرة.
babes?
هالتحرشات الصغيرة بتأثر على
All these
كتير
catcalls and many more are part of the daily experience of women in public spaces in Lebanon. These short phrases of harassment affect how women move in the city and must be considered when sustainable public transport is planned in Beirut. Fear of harassment has become one of the most distressing facets of taking public transportation for women, and it stops many from taking the bus. While most conversations about shared public transportation in Beirut are bleak, we are surprised by the effort the bus drivers make to protect female passengers. However, we also feel bad that these positive efforts are confined to that one. Respect and decency are shown for women on buses as if they were things in need of protection. In contrast to the positive support shown towards women, there is also an issue of inherently racial and classist attitudes that remain problematic. Black and Syrian women receive less consideration and protection than white Lebanese women, which makes refugee women more prone to being harassed. Do you think this comes from a culture that is against women's independence and that reflects in daily acts like taking a bus? The answer is that harassment on buses is not simply an issue of safety on public transportation. It points to the wider patriarchal system in which your existence as a woman in public spaces is always limited. I believe that we cannot make shared public transportation safer and more inclusive of women without questioning the patriarchy and the animosity it shows for them. This battle will not be fought if women avoid taking buses. As women, we must engage normally by being present in this bustling urban setting. We need to launch a discussion about transportation on the premise of solidarity with women and refusing racism. When we care for safety, dignity, and equality for everyone, this entails a better future for Beirut. No woman can enjoy her rise to the city without being given equal access to public space. We should be able to walk the streets anywhere and anytime, feeling safe and comfortable.
ألف ليرة كانت كفيلة تاخدني على الجامعة وترجعني
1,000 lira was enough for me to go to university and back home. The ride takes around half an hour to an hour, depending on the traffic. It's great to be able to move easily. I did not bother about where I'd park the car or stress over traffic jams, nor was I ever afraid of hitting a motorcycle with a car on the road. But with the economic crisis in 2018, more and more incidents of people being robbed started to make the rounds. I became afraid to go out in the evening and use public transport. For one thing, shortly after that, there were no more state buses. They were all eaten by rust and no longer ran. And for another, there are no fixed stops for the private buses, which is very inconvenient, especially at night. Unfortunately, unpleasant situations were happening more and more. I took a van to the village one time and I sat in the seat by the driver, thinking this was safer. I still don't know how I made it to my destination because of how upset I was, because the driver was staring at me all the way, verbally harassing me and insisting on getting my phone number. To be honest, I was afraid and I stopped feeling safe in taking shared transportation or driving my car at night. If there was a train that could take me at a specific and organized time, the first thing I would do is go and live in the village. I would save up on car gas, minimize the mental exhaustion of driving, decrease pollution, and feel safe. We asked a couple of people about this topic, and Rita explained to me how she feels about shared public transportation.
My experience with public transportation in Lebanon began when I was at school. We had a private driver for safety issues. But my sister and I asked our parents not to hire the driver so that we could take taxis or ride the bus back home. At first, they weren't enthusiastic, but we eventually convinced them because we were accompanied by our friends. Since they were coming with us and we weren't alone, we've been using public transportation for quite some time.
Then Rita and I spoke about our daily experiences before 2018. What does Rima do now? How does she move around?
مرحبا أنا اسمي ريما بيتي وشغلي بمنطقة بيروت تقريبا من 12 سنة.
Hello, my name is Rima. I live and work in Beirut. I've been using public transport for almost 12 years now. At first, I used to take the van to university, then I started taking the service taxi to work. But because my job requires me to make several stops at different places, I started using either the van or the service depending on where I was heading. Now I use it for other purposes, like if I want to buy something for myself, or if I want to go to the sports club, or to go out with my friends. What encouraged me the most about taking public transportation cars is how easy it is to find them during the day. Taking the van is cheaper than taking my car because of the high price of gas. Also, I can get anywhere I want with the vans because the drivers know the address of my destination quite well, and they know or can figure out the routes to take to avoid traffic. Despite all this, as a young woman, I faced many problems in taking the service taxi. There would be, for example, this young man who doesn't care about a woman's physical boundaries, sits very close to me. The service taxi driver would say inappropriate things. There's verbal harassment. As for going home at night, first of all, it's dark, then there are no fixed times for the service taxi cars or the vans. I'm waiting for a long time at night in the dark. I don't feel safe taking just any service taxi because I'm afraid of getting robbed, or that they take me to some place and rob or rape me. There are no fixed stations where I can stand and wait, stations that are safe and protected by laws. There's no law to protect me if I take a service taxi and I face any danger. We must keep trying to enforce special laws for service taxi cars and vans to prevent all these risks that any woman faces and to encourage girls to use shared public transportation. Then all Lebanese citizens can stop using private cars and use public transportation to ease traffic and decrease pollution. We could begin by installing specific bus stations with a timetable for every route. The time when the cars leave the station could be close to one another, so people are not late for their appointments. There should be laws against smoking as well as that ensure that the cars are in good shape. Then we can avoid accidents and car breaking down. Speed limits must be put in place, and there should be a code of conduct for how drivers deal with those who riot their cars. All these issues can minimize the problems we face. In addition, we need laws that punish any service taxi or van driver who harasses or tries to cross the line with any girl or anyone else riding the service taxi.
دكتور كارين عساف حاصلة على PhD بالعلوم الهندسية.
Dr. Karen Assaf has a PhD in engineering from Leuven University in Belgium. Her research covers issues of transportation, and she has worked with riders' rights since 2018.
All that is happening around the world to people who depend on trains, buses, underground trams, or even bicycles, even encouraging walking, decreases our dependency on cars. Also, if we look at the bigger picture, this is all for the sake of climate change. But if we look at a smaller scale, we want to look up the meaning of environment in Arabic. Environment is the ecosystem of surroundings. So if we are looking at shared transportation, It is not only an infrastructure to move people around. Rather, we want to look at shared transportation as an infrastructure that solidifies communal living. Individuals use shared transportation to be around others, and this is how people mingle and socialize. At the end of the day, the car has created a microculture, which is a culture of depending on the car for our personal safety. And thus, we do not want to share our environment, our surroundings with others. Shared transportation cultivates a culture of movement around others, a culture of being among people. The infrastructure is part of the environment, since we are looking at how our surroundings shape people's experiences as they take in everything that happens around them. Therefore, the surroundings affect people's experiences in transportation. For instance, let us imagine that we are walking on an unlit street and there's a sign saying that there's a bus station, but it's a bit dark. Whether I am a man or a woman, I would somewhat feel that this isn't safe. This affects the experience. As we try to adapt to our surroundings, if we are talking about streetlights, we are talking about infrastructure, urban design, road mapping, and investing in streetlights. All of this affects how people use transportation. As a woman, walking at night or even in the afternoon, she feels this is unsafe. It doesn't matter if it's the morning or the evening. What matters is what this environment offers. Me and who moves in this space, this eventually affects our experience of the environment. And she'll say, I'll take the car because the car is safer.
مثل ما بتقول كارين عساف
As Karen Assaf states, assaults affect all people and highlight men's supremacy in society. All this happens in public spaces and transportation, which is why awareness and education are vital to create transportation where everyone is treated with respect. People who use transportation, especially women who manage their homes, prefer cars because they are easier. Choosing between a car and shared public transport depends on many factors. Studies on gender must be inclusive of all needs, considering the perspective of the LGBTQ communities. A wide-ranging infrastructure is necessary to address these diverse needs, and means of shared transportation must be inclusive of everyone, including women. The needs of transportation users, like cost and speed, affect the choice between shared transportation and cars. The government must provide a safer infrastructure to ensure that there are transportation options to be trusted for everyone. If bus routes don't take people home, they resort to cars. And this problem is not limited to Lebanon. In Lebanon, walking to the supermarket presents a less safe and efficient experience when compared to driving. Women face the same fears when using the bus because of fears of harassment. Continuous worry results in anxiety, which is why it is necessary to create a safe environment. Finally, Dr. Karen Assaf emphasizes that before advising women to use shared public transportation, we must be aware of their backgrounds and identities to accommodate their needs in those forms of transportation.
بيرتبط قطاع النقل والمواصلات بكتير من المجالات.
The public transport sector is connected to many different areas of life, and the absence of government shared transport is a big problem. Firstly, and on the environmental level, the transport sector is a direct contributor to climate change and air pollution. Secondly, as we have heard from the girls' experiences and the experts' views, we have a problem of safety and fear that is felt by women when using any type of unofficial shared transportation. Unofficial private means of transportation fill the gap left by the absence of government transportation and urban planning. An infrastructure should provide a safe environment for all people, not only for women. We've discussed shared transportation in Lebanon in this episode, But we don't want to forget that shared transportation provided by the state is, in my opinion, almost non-existent in most Arab countries.
نشكر ضيوفنا المستمعين.
We would like to thank our guests and listeners for being part of this episode.
وبنتمنى إنه تكونوا
We hope you've enjoyed it and that you've benefited from the information and the experience shared by our guests.